Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys for the final breakdown, the final preview of 2025. We're looking to the Telecom, or the grand finals of the World Championship. One of the more hype matchups, I think, that we've had in recent years. You know, BLG T1 was hype. Weibo T1, people weren't really expecting Weibo to have any chance, and then DRX versus T1 was obviously a banger, but this is, of course, the classic. You're either getting an iconic underdog story or a historic three-peat on the Rift.
I think when you look at both of these organizations, both of these rosters, you can find reasons for not only, the players on Rift that want to get this done, but you can look at the off the Rift storylines for both of these teams as well and find lots of little things to pluck and pick at to make your decision of who is going to be the champion of 2025, the ultimate world champion at the end of the day.
And we start by looking at that team preview, playstyle, pick ban. I think both of these squads have had some pretty good drafts going through, especially the knockout stage. T1, I think, has leveled up in that regard, and KT have kind of found their niche, what they're comfortable with. But these are the number one and number two teams in terms of dragon percentage at the entire event. So no question, the priority for both of these squads is stacking dragons early to kind of take control of the map and force the opposition into making some tricky decisions.
It's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out with both of these teams clearly prioritizing that as a strategy, as an angle to get themselves accelerated in a game, get advantages, push, the opponent towards these objectives and these fights, or to then have to make that decision of giving it up and making sure that you are getting value elsewhere on the map to equal out or put yourself in a different pace, for the game and get your composition rolling. These type of things are going to be important for both T1 and KT, and seeing that. And it's going to be that push or pull, because it's either going to be a complete fiesta every time those objectives come around, where both of these teams are committed to that style, committed to the objective and getting that advantage, or you will see one of these teams kind of back out and, again, have to go through that difficult path of saying, where are the advantages that we can gain on the map that are not the dragon, are not the objectives that we have been prioritizing so far at the event?
And, we've seen so many Telecom wars go the distance, 40-plus minutes, have crazy endings, but 3 out of these 4 games that KT just played against Gen G, there was a almost game-deciding skirmish either around Herald or the Dragon, as we alluded to, but like pre-15 minutes or just after 15 minutes is when KT was striking against Gen G and taking games over.
I think one of the biggest things about that for me was the decisiveness of this KT Rolster within those team fights that would come through in those moments where you had to set yourself up, you had to make that play, the proactive play style that KT has shown us at this event and how they have been able to work through it. I think that really has been one of the strengths that you can look at them as a team heading into the finals.
The decisiveness and the confidence to do that, and we've heard Cuz talk about the optimal way that he views playing the game, and that is all 5 members having a common goal, having that synergy. It's less about the individual mechanical prowess of a player and more all 5 kind of working as one hive mind together. And the best teams in the world, that's how we've seen it play out when they can reach the tippity top.
It seems like when you're playing at that type of level with that type of focus and purpose, it's easier to make those predictions on what your teammates are going to do. And that's how you start layering in these combos, these wombo plays, that all of a sudden you get caught out in bad positioning for just a second, you can be popped out. You can lead that snowball of a team fight to being where you lose that objective. You lose that dragon. You lose that baron. You lose that elder dragon type of situation. That is one of those things that you have seen this KT Rolster that is playing at the peak of how they can play has been able to put out on Summoner's Rift here at the World Championship.
And however you break down this matchup lane by lane or as a team, what I'm always going to be looking at, and it's a intangible that is T1, it is the mojo, the clutch factor, and especially, this is going back years, we've seen extended team fights for T1. How many times against TES and against AL, especially in that game 5, when you have these 30-second, 60-second extended team fights where every small decision by one player can completely change who wins or loses the fight. More often than not, 9 times out of 10, it's T1 that comes out on top in these fights. And again, you saw it multiple times against the LPL.
It's a factor that you will not be able to equalize or even reach close enough territory if you are KT heading into this matchup is, as you laid out, the clutch factor, the been here, done that factor that this T1 lineup brings to the table, not only with the 4 members that are, of course, are the defending world champions that are stepping to the plate, but mainly the guy in the mid lane, just Faker himself, the clutch factor, the big plays, the championship winning moments that he has had throughout his career. You absolutely cannot discredit, undervalue what that brings to the table, what type of life that can breathe to you in a series like this.
And so that's why, KT, make that decisive snap engage to end a team fight before you're getting to these extended moments where Faker and, guys like Guma can kind of step up to make a play that nobody sees or be aggressive and kind of take things over. You allude to that Faker matchup as we get to the lane by lane breakdown. No better way to start than in that mid lane, because we saw Faker, the switch was flipped. He sees the LPL in a best of 5 and there's something activated in his brain where he reaches to that next level. But it's hard to ever go against Faker in a finals matchup. But if you were to redo the top 20 players at the event right now heading into finals, BDD is probably number 1 on that list.
He's very, very high up there. And if there ever was somebody that could stand on the other side of a matchup from Faker and say, yeah, I like my chances, I like my odds, I think BDD is probably the strongest name out there for someone that could be there. And we have seen him do it this year is the most important factor. When you look at this matchup in that head-to-head, you can go through and look at how they individually perform. You can look through this event and find certain things for sure. But really, to me, it is one of those, the privilege that we have with a matchup like this where you have seen it already multiple times this year. You can go to that history book and look through how things have played out this year. How did things work? Everything else like that. And then the series that KT won, BDD was a giga monster, a mega factor in lane against Faker and out of lane in all the team fights and getting things done. So yes, you can, be betting on the form, the play, the creativity, the clutch factor that Faker will bring to the table. And that is absolutely more than enough to put him ahead of someone like BDD, if those are the things that you are valuing. But if you are looking at how things have played out this year and the capability of the upset and being above what is this unbelievable level that Faker always brings out at the World Championship, I would believe a player like BDD is capable of it.
Especially when we just saw him do it to Chovy, who was the consensus best player, best mid laner coming into this event. And then you look at champion pool, obviously, some of the big meta picks, they're going to share and be contested. Azir, Talia, Orianna, both guys can play those to the highest level, but there are some more pocket picks that kind of favor one or the other. We know we've seen the Mel from Faker take over games. The Galio is always a threat that you favor Faker over BDD. But the Yone pick, BDD's one of the best, and we meme on Faker for that performance. And the Zoe is another one that I think there's going to be some dancing and tiptoeing around in specifically these mid lane matchups for pick ban.
And that's another area that you want to see it equalized in the X factors of the series, is looking at that pick and ban specifically for this crucial mid lane matchup and what you are going to allow over, what you are going to try and secure for yourself and what that gives you in advantages. That is going to be a massive part of it. And identifying in on a pick like the Yone, where there is a discrepancy in that performance and that lethality on how that champion plays. Yes, that is going to be a factor that I think can be there. And I love that you also bring up the Zoe, because that's another one of those X factor difference making out of the book at this moment type of champions that that can be a difference maker in a series, can be a difference maker in the hands of BDD. Those are the things that you want to be seeing. I do also think, as you said, that Mel could be the angle for T1. I wonder if that's something that, again, has been cooking, has been working on the slow cooker back burner for T1 all this time around. Could be something special as far as when you're looking at how do you equalize this mid lane matchup and where the priority as far as these picks should be.
The priority for picks in the jungle are pretty even across the board. You look at Owner and Cuz, what they've played so far at this event, it's been pretty meta across the board. Obviously, we have the Mundo first time pick that came out of Owner. We also seen Cuz play the Mundo. But other than that, the standard stuff, Vi, Wukong, some Kiana thrown in. The Poppy's obviously going to be a big pick for flexing in multiple roles into this one. But really, I think there's an opportunity for one or both of these guys to pull out something that's a little off meta, something that they've had throughout their career, because it's the World Finals. So you're not holding back now. Anything you've been cooking up all year needs to come out, and we haven't seen it out of either of these junglers so far.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly going to be one of the things that you can be looking forward to in this series and trying to make those predictions, expectations on what picks, what champions are going to be that priority. When you're talking about looking at both of them, and I'm looking at Owner, and I'm thinking of that Mundo game, having that confidence in yourself, not only, but also your teammates and all the feedback that you're getting from them about this champion, that yes, you can roll the dice and you can play something that you haven't played all that familiar, that you're not all that familiar with and everything else. But I think that when you are talking about this matchup, this final world championship, I'm not as confident in seeing that out of T1 as much as I am out of KT, to try and find that equalizer, try to find that edge to really put yourself above someone like T1 and a player like Cuz. What we have seen from him throughout the year, throughout his career, there are still some more angles that he can pull on and bring to the table for KT.
And so BDD Faker, it's kind of, what are you prioritizing? Are you getting the legacy of Faker and holding that over the tournament performance that we've seen out of BDD? Jungle side, I feel like Cuz and Owner have been the two best at this event, so it's got to be a near toss-up because these guys are the two at the top of the table.
It is. I think if you're going purely off of the event, you might take Cuz because of how good KT has been, how integral he has been with everything that's moving in the right direction for that team. But you could also look at Owner and bet on what you have seen the entirety of this year, which you haven't seen any other year from Owner, is being one of the leading charge members of T1 when things are going at their very best. So that is certainly going to be something that I think will factor into how people are viewing this matchup heading into this series, is whether you are banking more on what you have seen at this event from Cuz and KT, or you're banking on what how you have seen this whole year from someone like Owner and the dynasty that is T1.
Owner always seemingly the first guy on the chopping block for roster changes for T1. Definitely not the case here in 2025. The least talked about matchup probably heading into this event is the top side. Doran versus Perfect, and that's because you've seen both of them kind of lean into that weak side, mentality within this team. We've seen a lot of the Orns, the Scion, obviously the Cassante and Ambessa's thrown out. Doran has played a few more carry champions. We've seen more Mordekaiser, the Camille out of him. Perfect hasn't really at all at Worlds, other than the Rumble, which will be a contested one, and Perfect's probably a better Rumble. But Gwen and Jace probably the first one up for carries for the KT side, and he has been able to play carries, and again, in a World Finals, you have to have the possibility of being able to play through every lane.
This is one of those ones where it doesn't really feel like I should expect it, but I feel like I want to put the edge towards KT here, despite everything that Doran brings to the table for T1, despite how stable he has been throughout the majority of his time on T1. I'm looking at the again, the head-to-head that you did have between these teams, and when you do get that KT win, Perfect more than handled him in the top side and was more of a factor within these team fights, and getting KT to be the winner on the day is certainly something that I am going to keep in mind heading towards this series. And then you refresh it on, okay, give me something from this event that you know put in the side the category of Doran on T1. There's not a ton of overwhelmingly positive performances individually from him at the event. So I certainly can see the angle where you can bet on seeing again a repeat of that head to head we had in the LCK and a continuation of how Perfect has been able to function and contribute for this KT team that has been very different at the World Championship compared to the entirety of the year.
Despite being the least talked about, going to have a huge impact on that top side. But the biggest X factor, most important matchup heading into this series has got to be the bot lane for a couple of reasons. Number one, we already talked about how highly prioritized dragons are for both of these squads. So you know, and we have seen the bot lane prio in the laning phase for both of these squads. And you also have some pretty different champion pools for both the bot laners and the supports heading into this one. So whoever gets the best of this bot lane prio probably winning this series.
And I think it's also gets to the real heart of this whole matchup and head to head. It doesn't have the legs. If Dom is not playing at the level that we have gotten as the world, this world's event Dom has been able to deliver for KT, if it is simply regular season Dom, if it is even going to the Dom that his performance within that upset against T1 in the regular season of the LCK, that is not going to be enough to take down the level and the factor that Guma Yusi will be in this World Championship Finals. I'm telling you right now, it has to be at the highest of highs for someone like Dom to go toe-to-toe with what we have seen from Guma at this event so far. Someone that has very much replanted his flag, his stake within the T1 empire to say that I am the future here for the team.
And the draft for the bot lane specifically gets pretty spicy. We know the Ziggs for Dom and the Ziggs against T1 is absolutely either going to be permabanned or taken away and going to have an impact on the series. But some of these main picks for them for actual AD carries, the Kai'Sa for Guma. I know Kai'Sa's been a bit of a meme, but he has popped off the last two times he played it in knockouts. Not really a pick that we see Dom on. For the Kai'Sa, the Ezreal's probably the next behind Ziggs in terms of famous for Dom, and Ezreal's not really a pick that we think of for Guma. We have, the Caitlyn, Varus, Sivir types that both of them play, but both of them have a couple picks that the other doesn't play.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly going to be one of the areas that will be attacked, will be prioritized within the draft, right? And when that happens, that allows other areas to creep through, right? Things that you are always taking care of. Oh, that Zoe we didn't want to see from BDD, maybe that sneaks on through. The Azir that you always keep away from Faker, maybe that makes its way on through. Other things like that can be happening, and I'm looking specifically at the champions that these bot laners want to play is going to be that factor, that domino that starts it all within this pick and ban of Fearless Draft for the World Championship Finals.
And when you now throw in the supports into that angle, all of a sudden the draft gets tricky against T1 because you're saying, well, Kyria can't play Bard. And as much as I love Peter, and he's a fantastic player, the level up, the story, he's such a charismatic guy that you want to root for, Kyria is the most terrifying player if I'm KT Rolster right now, especially what he's done against the LPL. Again, this event, all these Nico flanks were absolutely insane. Peter plays a good Nico, but you can't let Kyria get now Nico or Bard. The list is getting longer. He was so oppressive on Seraphine. Kyria, I'm the most terrified of.
Very much so is, again, one of the X factors of all X factors within League of Legends is Kyria and what he can bring towards a matchup, whether that is the matchup of the whole teams or just simply that head-to-head of the supports and what you're going to be going up against. Yes, this is going to be one of those ones where I think if you're Peter, you have to do your very best to almost say that Kyria doesn't exist. There is no Kyria on the other side. You need to play your game, your objective, your priorities. And yes, I understand. You know who's going to be trying to make sure that you don't get to play the game you want to play and the objectives and everything else? Well, it is going to be that other guy on the other side. Kyria is going to be a big problem in that as well. But I think that's the way that you got to play this to your, what is going to accelerate, get your team in the best position. And that is that from Peter. So I think that's where you're going to be looking at it. And yes, it will be as well just like the prioritization around the champions for these ADCs, it will be there in just negating what is possible for someone like Kyria and trying to limit the game-breaking plays that he certainly is capable of within the biggest of team fight moments.
Despite this insane glow up from Doctom at this event, I'm still hard pressed to give KT the edge bot lane wise over T1 because of the storied, again, clutch factor of Guma and Kyria, even though they just beat up on Ruler and Duro in that previous round. But despite maybe not having the bot lane advantage, we do have Peanuts' last dance has been blessed onwards to Doctom, still getting revenge for their time together as Nongshim already got it against Gen G. So I feel like the emotion and motivation has got to be higher for KT going for their first ever title than T1 trying for a historic three-peat. I feel like the roller coaster can't come up short in these finals. It's destined that they get the quote-unquote upset against T1.
I think that it is a very uphill battle still for this KT Rolster team, despite the level up, despite the improvements we have seen from them over the last 2 months. But when you head into a matchup like this, and we all know anything can happen on any given day type of situation, I think that this is one of those ones where if KT is going to win, it's going to happen in 4 games. It's going to be one of these ones where you maybe get a response from T1, but it is still that overwhelming. It is that crushing of the fist from KT says, no more life in this series. The year's done. We're the champions. That's the way that they can get there. But if this thing is going to Silver Scrapes, if this thing is being decided by an overwhelming win, I think that is where you find T1 as the ones that are lifting the Summoners Cup at the end of the year.
Probably also if there is that clutch Game 5 factor for T1. But I think it was Jat who said the only scoreline that T1 has never had in a World Finals is losing 1-3. So you might be onto something here.
I don't want it to be the truth, but I think absolutely, again, if there is an angle for KT, if you are going to stop what could be, again, that engine of T1, getting it rolling for that Silver Scrapes magic, that's how you do it. You don't even let that engine start. You shut it down right away. Take out the key, KT as the champions. That's how you get it done.
Either way, we're not excited, just enthusiastic about KT making it to finals.